Princess Lirelei stood on top of her black tower, watching the burning ships fall from the sky like dying stars. The silver dragon Vorthak wrapped his massive body around the tower, his ancient eyes reflecting the orange flames that lit up the 3 moons above them. The war had been going on for 7 long years, and tonight felt different. The ships belonged to the Galactic Confederation, and they had come to destroy her people. The humans thought the elves were weak because they used magic instead of technology. They called them primitives and savages, but tonight the elves had shown them how wrong they were. Dragonfire had melted through their metal shields. Like hot knives through butter, Lirelei watched the last of the great warships crash into the crystal mountains below. Smoke rose from the wreckage, and she could smell the burning metal even from this height. Her people had won another battle, but she knew more ships would come. They always did. The humans never seemed to learn. That magic was just as powerful as their machines. Maybe even more powerful. Something caught her eye in the gardens below. A small pod had landed among the crystal flowers. It was different from the others, much smaller, and it had landed softly instead of crashing like the rest. Lirelei felt Vorthak tense beneath her. The dragon had noticed it too. 3 of her guards were already moving toward the pod. Their silver armor gleamed in the moonlight as they approached with weapons ready. Lirelei watched as the pod opened with a soft hiss of escaping air. A figure stepped out, and Lirelei felt her breath catch in her throat. It was a human, but not like any she had seen before. He wore simple clothes instead of the heavy armor the Confederation soldiers always used. His weapons looked old-fashioned, like something from ancient human history. The man raised his hands to show he was not going to fight. Her guards surrounded him, but he did not seem afraid. Most humans trembled when they saw elves up close. This one looked calm. Almost like he belonged here. Lirelei made a decision. She touched Vorthak's neck, and the dragon began to descend from the tower in slow spirals. Wind rushed through her long silver hair as they landed gracefully in the garden. The crystal flowers chimed like bells as Vorthak's claws touched the ground. The human looked up at her, and Lirelei felt something strange happen inside her chest. His eyes were blue like deep ocean water, and when he looked at her, she felt like he could see right into her soul. There was no hatred there, no fear, just something that made her think of long-forgotten memories. Her guards brought the man forward and forced him to kneel, but he never took his eyes off her face. Captain Elena stepped forward and spoke in the common tongue. This human was found in the wreckage. Your Highness, he carries primitive weapons and refuses to give his name. The man spoke then, and his voice made Lirelei take a step back. He was speaking perfect Elvish, with an accent she could not place but somehow recognized. Your Highness, he said, my name is Jake Morrison, and I have come to end this war. The guards looked shocked. No human should be able to speak their ancient language, but this one spoke it like he had known it all his life. Lirelei felt Vorthak rumble deep in his chest. The dragon was sensing something too. How do you know our language? The princess asked, stepping closer. Jake Morrison looked up at her and smiled sadly. I learned it long ago, from people who were kind to me. People who saved my life when I was just a child. Lirelei felt her heart skip. This was impossible. Humans were the enemy. They had been trying to destroy her people for 7 years. But something about this man felt familiar, like an old song she had once known but forgotten. Where did you learn it? She asked. In this very palace. He replied, 700 years ago. The guards laughed, but Lirelei did not. She was old enough to remember 700 years ago. She had been young then, barely more than a child herself. But she remembered something, a human boy who had lived in the palace for a short time. A boy who had been different from other humans. That is impossible. Captain Elena said, humans do not live. That long Jake Morrison stood up slowly, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. He looked directly at Lirelei and spoke words that made her world tilt sideways. I know this because I was that boy, princess. You saved my life when my ship crashed in your realm. Your magic changed me, made me something between human and elf. I have been fighting in the shadows ever since, waiting for the right time to return. Lyrelay stared at him, her mind racing. The boy from her childhood had been sent away. She remembered, crying when he left. She remembered how her mother had said it was for the best that humans and elves could never truly be friends. But what if the boy had not died? What if he had somehow survived and grown into this man, standing before her? Vorthak spoke, then his voice like rolling thunder in the ancient dragon tongue. The marked one returns just as the prophecy said. The time of choosing draws near. Lyrelay felt the blood drain from her face. Vorthak had never mentioned any prophecy before dragons, only spoke of such things when something terrible was about to happen. Jake Morrison heard the dragon's words and nodded as if he understood. Yes, old friend, he said in the dragon tongue. I have returned, and I bring news that will change everything. The real enemy is not the Confederation. It never was. He looked back at Lyrelay and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. Fear not for himself, but for her, for all of them. There is something coming, he said, switching back to Elvish. Something that feeds on magic and grows stronger with every spell we cast. Every battle we fight brings it closer. The Confederation thinks we are building a weapon, but they are wrong. We are ringing a dinner bell. Lyrelay felt the crystal flowers around them begin to hum with nervous energy. Even the plants could sense that something had changed. The war they had been fighting was about to become something much bigger and much more dangerous. What do you want from us? She asked. Jake Morrison looked up at the 3 moons hanging in the sky, then back at her. I want to save both our peoples, he said. And I want to ask for your help one more time, just like when we were children. Lyrelay remembered then, a small human boy, asking her to help him find his way home. She had been the one to show him the gardens, to teach him their language, to be his friend, when no one else would. Now that same boy had returned as a man asking for her help again. But this time the stakes were much higher than just finding his way home. This time it might be about saving everyone. Queen Eliana was not happy when her daughter brought the human prisoner to the great throne room. The queen had been expecting a normal prisoner exchange or execution, not this strange man who spoke their language like he was born to it. Even worse, Lyrelay seemed different around him. The throne room was huge, with walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Hundreds of the most important elves in the kingdom had gathered to see this unusual human. The air hummed with magic, as the court wizards kept their spells ready just in case. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the room with his hands free. Lyrelay had insisted they not chain him, which made many of the nobles angry. A human should be in chains, they whispered, especially during wartime. But the princess had given her orders. Queen Eliana sat on her throne of woven starlight, studying the human with ancient eyes. She had ruled for over 2,000 years and had seen many strange things, but this felt different. This man looked at her not with fear or hatred, but with something that made her uncomfortable recognition. Tell me, human, she said in the common tongue. Why should we not execute you right now for the crimes of your people? Jake stepped forward and, when he spoke, his words rang through the great hall in perfect ancient Elvish, the language of the royal court. Because, your majesty, you know who I am, even though you have tried very hard to forget. Gasps echoed through the hall. No human should know the ancient tongue. It was forbidden knowledge taught only to elves of royal blood. But this man spoke it like it was his native language, Queen. Eliana felt her mask of calm authority slip just a little. How do you know our sacred language? Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. I learned it here in this very palace when I was 8 years old. You had a human child living among you for 3 years, a boy from a crashed colony ship that had drifted into your dimension. The queen felt her heart stop beating for a moment. She remembered the human child who had been different from other humans, who had aged slowly and learned their magic, like he was born for it. The child who had become too close to her daughter. You lie, she whispered. That child died when we sent him back to human space, did I? Jake asked, and as he spoke, something impossible began to happen. His appearance started to change slightly. His ears became more pointed. His eyes began to glow with inner light. Your magic did. More than heal me, Your Majesty. It changed me down to my very bones, made me something that could live in both worlds but belonged fully to neither. Lyrelei made a small sound and stepped toward him. She was remembering now the human boy who had been her best friend, who had learned to speak with the crystal flowers, who had cried when they told him he had to leave. You are him, she whispered. You are Jake. He turned to her and nodded. I never forgot you, Lyra. Even when they tried to make me forget. I spent centuries in the Shadow Wars fighting things that slip between dimensions, but I always remembered the elf princess who showed me how to make the crystals sing. Captain. Elena stepped forward, her weapon raised. This could be a trap. Your Highness, humans are clever with their technology. They could have made him look like one of us. But Vorthak, the great silver dragon who had been silent until now, lifted his massive head and spoke in the ancient dragon tongue that few elves could understand. Bears the mark of our realm. The magic that flows in his blood is real and old. He is what he claims to be. And his return means the prophecy begins. Queen Eliana felt fear creep into her heart. Vorthak was older than anyone in the kingdom, and dragons only spoke of prophecies when great danger was coming. What prophecy? The dragon turned his ancient eyes to her and spoke so all could understand. The watchers beyond have stirred. They sense the magic of our realm bleeding through the dimensional barriers. The war with the humans has weakened the walls between worlds. Something hungry stirs in the spaces between stars. Jake nodded grimly. The Confederation fleet that attacks you, they are not doing it for conquest or resources. Their scientists detected massive energy readings coming from your space. They think you are building some kind of super weapon. The truth is much worse. He walked to the center of the room and spread his hands. Every spell you cast, every dragon breath, every piece of magic used in this war creates ripples in dimensional space. There are things in the void between worlds that feed on magical energy. And you have been sending out dinner invitations for 7 years. A wizard named Marcus stepped forward. What? Are you saying, human, that we should stop defending ourselves? Jake shook his head. I am saying that the enemy is not the Confederation. The real enemy is what the war is attracting. Something that will devour both human and elf alike if we do not. Stop it, Queen. Ileana stood from her throne, her royal robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. Prove it, she demanded. Show us this enemy you speak of. Jake looked at Lyrelei, then back at the Queen. I can show you, but you will not like what you see. And once you know the truth, there will be no going back. The Queen nodded. I have ruled for 2,000 years. I have seen dark things before. Jake closed his eyes and began to speak words in a language none of them recognized. It was older than, elvish, older than dragon tongue, older than anything that should exist on this side of reality. The air in the throne room began to shimmer, and bend a window opened in the space above their heads, showing the dark void between dimensions. At first, they saw nothing but empty space. Then something moved in the darkness, something vast and hungry with tentacles that stretched across impossible distances. Each tentacle was covered in mouths that whispered in languages that hurt to hear. This is what feeds on your magic, Jake said. His voice strained from holding the vision open. This is what grows stronger every time you cast a spell. It has been sleeping for eons, but your war has begun to wake it up. The vision showed more. The creature was not alone. There were others moving in the dark spaces between worlds, all of them drawn by the magical energy bleeding through from the elf realm. Dr. Amy Foster. Jake called, and another figure stepped from the shadows near the throne room entrance. She was human. Wearing the uniform of a Confederation scientist, I brought her to explain what the humans have detected. Dr. Foster bowed nervously to the Queen. Your Majesty, we have been monitoring quantum distortions in this region for months. Our instruments show reality itself is becoming unstable. Admiral Kane believes your people are testing some kind of reality weapon. He plans to attack with the full fleet in 72 hours. Lyrelei looked between Jake and the human scientist. You mean both sides are wrong about each other? Jake nodded. The Confederation thinks you are preparing to destroy them. You think they want to conquer you. But the real enemy is something neither side understands. And when Admiral Kane arrives with his quantum weapons, the damage to dimensional space could tear open permanent portals. The vision above them pulsed, and the creature in the darkness seemed to turn toward them, as if it could sense their observation. Jake quickly closed the window, but the memory of those hungry eyes remained. Queen Eliana sank back onto her throne, the weight of this knowledge pressing down on her. Then what do we do? Jake looked around the room at all the faces staring at him, elves and now one human united in fear. We do something that has never been done before. We unite our peoples. We combine elf magic with human technology. And we pray that together we are strong enough to face what is coming. Vorthak rumbled deep in his chest. The prophecy speaks of a bridge between worlds. That bridge is you, young one. But prophecies always demand a price. Jake met the dragons. Ancient gaze, I know, old friend. I have always known. But some prices must be paid. Lyrelay stepped forward and took his hand just like she had when they were children together. What price? What does the prophecy say? Vorthak looked at her with eyes full of sorrow. The bridge must hold until all have crossed safely, but the one who becomes the bridge cannot cross himself. The throne room fell silent as the meaning sank in. Jake had returned to save both their peoples, but doing so would cost him his life. And somehow Lyrelay knew he had always known this would be the price of peace. The news that Jake was the lost human boy from their past sent waves of shock through the elven court. But it was Vorthak's words about the prophecy that truly frightened them. Queen Eliana ordered the ancient texts brought up from the deepest vaults beneath the palace, while Jake and Dr. Foster worked to contact the approaching Confederation fleet. Lyrelay could not stop looking at Jake as they walked through the crystal gardens where they had played as children. He looked older now, and there was a sadness in his eyes that had not been there when they were young. But his smile was the same, and the way he made the crystal flowers sing with just a touch proved he was truly who he claimed to be. Jake told her about the years since. He had left the elven realm, about fighting creatures that slipped between dimensions, about watching from the shadows as the war between their peoples grew worse. He had tried many times to make contact with both sides, but no one would listen to warnings about interdimensional threats. The war was too profitable for some and too personal for others, he explained as they sat by the singing fountain where they used to meet. I watched good people on both sides die while the real enemy grew stronger. Dr. Foster had managed to establish communication with Admiral Kane, but the conversation had not gone well. The Admiral was convinced the elves were trying to trick him into lowering his guard. His quantum scanners showed massive energy buildups in elf space, and he believed they were preparing some kind of reality. Lyrelay listened as Jake spoke with the Admiral over the communication crystal, trying to explain the true danger. Admiral Kane, this is Jake Morrison. I know this is hard to believe, but both our peoples are in danger from something neither side understands. The Admiral's voice crackled through the crystal. Morrison, we have records of you. You disappeared 7 years ago during a routine patrol. Your own people think you are dead or captured. I have been fighting a war you do not know exists. Jake replied, there are things that live in the spaces between dimensions, and our conflict has attracted their attention. Every quantum weapon you fire, every elf spell that gets cast makes the barriers. Weaker Admiral Kane laughed harshly. Morrison, if this is some kind of elf trick to make us lower our defenses, it will not work. We attack in 60 hours, and nothing will stop us. The communication crystal went dark, and Jake sat back with a sigh. The Admiral was a good man, but he could not see past his fear and anger. Neither could most of the elf nobles who still wanted to fight, rather than ally with humans. Queen Eliana returned from the vaults carrying a book so old its pages were made of crystallized dragon scales. The text was written in the first language, the words that dragons had used to teach magic to the earliest elves. She read aloud in a voice heavy with dread, when the hunger between stars wakes, drawn by the songs of power. The two peoples of different worlds must stand as one, or all shall be devoured. The bridge between realms shall be built of willing sacrifice, and only through unity can the darkness be turned back. She looked up at Jake. But the price is clear. The one who builds the bridge must become part of it. A living connection between the two peoples that holds even beyond death. Jake nodded. I have known this since I first learned about the prophecy. The magic that changed me when I was a child. It was preparing me for this moment. I can channel both elf magic and human technology because I need to be the connection point. Lyrelai felt her heart breaking. You cannot ask this of him, Mother. There has to be another way. Vorthak, who had been listening in silence, spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. The prophecy also speaks of a choice. The bridge can be made of one willing sacrifice or many unwilling ones. If Jake does not fulfill his destiny, the hunger will take. Millions from both peoples. Dr. Foster, who had been studying the ancient text with growing alarm, looked up. Admiral Kane is bringing the entire 7th Fleet 40 ships with full quantum arsenals. If those weapons start firing in this magically charged space, the dimensional damage could be permanent. Jake stood and began pacing like he used to do as a child when he was thinking hard. We need to show both sides what they are really facing. A demonstration that will make them understand the true enemy. But how? Lyrelai asked. The creatures exist between dimensions. How can we show them something they cannot see? Jake stopped pacing and looked at her with the expression she remembered from when they were children. He had the same look when he was about to suggest something dangerous and exciting. We open a controlled portal, he said. Just for a few seconds. Just enough to let one of the smaller creatures through. Something the fleet sensors can detect and both sides can see. Queen Aliana stood up, alarmed. That is incredibly dangerous. What if you cannot close the portal again? Then we all die. Jake said simply. But if I do nothing, we all die anyway, just more slowly. The demonstration might convince Admiral Kane to work with us instead of attacking. Dr. Foster was running calculations on her portable computer. The quantum disturbance from opening a portal that large would be detected by every sensor in the fleet. Admiral Kane would have no choice but to investigate. Lyrelai grabbed Jake's arm. You are talking about letting a monster into our world. What if it attacks our people? Jake covered her hand with his. I will be controlling the portal. I can pull it back the moment we have shown both sides what we are facing. The creature will only be here for seconds. Vorthak rumbled with what might have been approval. The young dragon riders could help contain the creature long enough for the demonstration. Dragon fire burns in all dimensions. Queen Aliana looked around at all of them. Her daughter, the human who had once been like a son to her, the dragon who had been her companion for 1,000 years, and the human scientist who represented their former enemies. Are we all in agreement that this desperate plan is our best hope? One by one they nodded, even Dr. Foster, who would be risking court-martial for helping the elves. Then let us prepare. Jake said, we will need every dragon rider and every mage in the kingdom. The portal will open above the main courtyard where both the elf court and the Confederation sensors can observe. As they made ready for the dangerous demonstration, Lyrelai found herself thinking about the prophecy. If Jake became the bridge between their peoples, would she lose him again just when she had found him? Would love always have to end in sacrifice? Jake seemed to sense her thoughts and took her hand just like when they were children. Do not mourn for what has not happened yet, he said. We still have time to find another way. But deep down, they both knew the prophecy had never been wrong and the price of saving both their peoples was already decided. The only question was whether Jake would have the strength to pay it when the time came. Above them, Vorthak spread his great wings, preparing for the most dangerous magic any of them had ever attempted. They were about to open a doorway to the space between worlds and invite a nightmare through, just to prove that even worse nightmares were waiting on the other side. The demonstration was more terrifying than anyone had expected. Jake opened the portal in the main courtyard with Lyrelai and 12 dragon riders forming a protective circle around him. The tear in reality appeared like a wound in the air, showing the dark space between dimensions. What came through was not one of the smaller creatures Jake had planned for, but something much worse. A tentacle the size of a starship pushed through the portal, covered in eyes and mouths that screamed in languages that made everyone who heard them feel sick. The thing reached toward the assembled elves with obvious hunger, Dragon fire erupted from all directions as the riders attacked, but the creature seemed to absorb the magical flames and grow larger. Vorthak roared commands in the ancient tongue while Jake fought to close the portal. His face twisted with effort as the interdimensional forces fought against him. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, the creature thrashed in the courtyard, destroying crystal statues and leaving black marks on the ground where its touch poisoned reality itself. Then Jake finally managed to snap the portal shut, sending the tentacle back to the dark space where it belonged. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Admiral Kane demanding an explanation over every communication channel the elves had. The Confederation sensors had detected the dimensional disturbance and recorded energy readings that should have been impossible. Dr. Foster established contact with the fleet and put Admiral Kane on the main viewing crystal. The Admiral's face appeared above the courtyard, looking pale and shaken. "Morrison, what in blazes was that thing? Our instruments went crazy. That was just a small part of one creature," Jake said, breathing heavily from the effort of controlling the portal. "There are hundreds of them in the space between dimensions, and they are all heading this way, drawn by the magical energy from our War Admiral." Kane stared at the scorch marks in the courtyard and the faces of the elven nobles who were still recovering from seeing their worst nightmares. "Made real. You are telling me this whole time we have been fighting each other while something worse was coming. For both of us." Queen Ileana stepped forward, her royal authority intact despite having just witnessed cosmic horror. "Admiral Kane, I propose an immediate ceasefire and alliance. Our peoples must work together, or we will all be devoured." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying the readings his science officers were feeding him. "Dr. Foster, is this data accurate? Are we really looking at interdimensional predators?" Dr. Foster nodded gravely. "Sir, the quantum signatures match nothing in our databases. These creatures exist partially outside normal spacetime. They feed on magical energy, and they are definitely moving toward this region." Admiral Kane made a decision that would change the course of the war. "All ships stand down. We are forming an emergency alliance with the Elven fleet. Prepare for joint operations." The next few hours were a blur of activity as both fleets worked to combine their technologies. Elf magic was used to enhance human shield generators, while human computers helped elven mages calculate more precise spell trajectories. Dragon riders learned to fly in formation with starfighter squadrons, but as the alliance took shape, Jake began to show signs of strain. Each time he channeled power between the magical and technological systems, his body became more translucent. Lyrelei watched in growing horror as the man she loved started to fade before her eyes. "The hybrid nature that lets me bridge both worlds is also killing me," Jake explained as they worked together to merge a dragon flame projector with a plasma cannon. "My body was never meant to channel this much mixed energy." Der Foster ran medical scans that showed impossible results. Jake's cellular structure was breaking down at the quantum level. The magical changes he had undergone as a child were reversing themselves as he used his bridging abilities. "There has to be something we can do," Lyrelei insisted. But Jake just smiled sadly. The prophecy was clear about the price. He said, "I always knew this was how it would end. The bridge holds as long as the builder remains part of the Foundation, Queen." Ileana brought them the ancient text again, reading the parts they had missed before. "The bridge between worlds burns bright, but burns brief. The willing sacrifice becomes the eternal guardian watching over both peoples from the space between spaces." Vorthak landed beside them, his great head lowering to look Jake in the eyes. The dragon spoke in the ancient tongue. "The time comes, young bridge builder. The hunger arrives with the next tide of darkness." Jake looked up at the sky where both the elven moons and the human fleet were visible. The creatures were coming faster now, drawn by all the magical and technological energy being used to prepare their defenses. They had perhaps 6 hours before the first wave arrived. Admiral Kane transported down to the surface to coordinate the final preparations. He was a gruff military man, but even he could see that Jake was fading. "I do not like sending a good man to his death, Morrison, even if you are technically AWOL from my fleet." Jake grinned. "It would not be the first time I died for something important." "Admiral, besides, I am not really dying. I am just changing into something else." something that can hold the bridge open permanently. Lyreley took his hand and felt how cold his fingers had become. The warmth was leaving him as his human side gave way to the magical transformation. "Is there no way to save you?" Jake squeezed her hand. "I will still be here, just not in a way you can touch. The bridge will be built from my life force, but my consciousness will remain to guard the connection between our peoples." The combined fleet moved into position with dragons flying alongside, starfighters and elven mage ships working in formation with human cruisers. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sight any of them had ever witnessed as they prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of both species. Jake spent his last hours as a fully physical being saying goodbye to the people who had shaped his life. Dr. Foster, who had been his partner in the Shadow Wars, Admiral Kane, who had taught him military strategy, Queen Eliana, who had been like a mother to him, but most of his time was spent with Lyreley, walking through the crystal gardens and remembering their childhood together. They talked about the games they had played and the dreams they had shared and the love that had grown between them over centuries of separation. When the hunger finally arrived, it came not as individual creatures but as a wave of living darkness that poured through multiple dimensional rifts at once. The combined fleet opened fire with everything they had but conventional. Weapons barely slowed the cosmic horror. That was when Jake began his final transformation, standing at the center of the command ship with magical energy flowing through him from every elf mage and technological power channeling through him from every human system. He became a living conduit between two different types of energy, creating something neither side could achieve alone. The bridge between worlds burned bright in the space above the fleet, visible to both dimensions, as Jake gave up his physical form to become something eternal. The combined power flowing through him struck the hunger like a weapon. It could not absorb or deflect as the darkness retreated. Jake looked at Lyreley one last time, his form already becoming something made of light and energy instead of flesh and blood. "Remember me," he said as his voice echoed across both fleets. "And remember that love is the strongest bridge of all." The final battle erupted across 12 dimensions as the hunger between stars emerged in its full terrifying glory. The creature was larger than planets, with tentacles that stretched across star systems and mouths that could swallow entire fleets. It existed in multiple dimensions at once, feeding on the fundamental forces that held reality together. The combined fleet of elves and humans fought with everything they had. Dragonfire mixed with plasma cannons while elven war magic enhanced human shield generators. But every weapon they used was absorbed by the creature and turned against them. Ships began disappearing into dimensional pockets that served as the monster's feeding chambers. Admiral Kane watched his sensors in growing horror as reality itself began to break down around the creature. "Sir, the quantum readings are off the charts. This thing is unmaking the laws of physics just by existing." Queen Eliana stood on the bridge of her flagship watching dragons and starfighters fall to the writhing tentacles. "Our weapons are useless against it. How do we fight something that exists beyond our understanding?" That was when Jake activated the final phase of the prophecy. Standing at the nexus point between the magical and technological command centers, he began the transformation that would save both peoples and destroy him in the process. His body started to dissolve into pure energy as he became a living bridge between two different types of power. Volunteers from both fleets began channeling their life force through him. Human determination merged with elven magical essence, creating something the hunger could not absorb. Pure willpower given form through willing sacrifice. The energy flowing through Jake was different from anything the creature had encountered before. Jake felt his consciousness expanding as his physical form disappeared. He could see through the eyes of every dragon rider and starfighter pilot, feel the thoughts of every elf mage and human engineer. He was becoming the connection that bound both peoples together, through gritted teeth that were already becoming light. Jake shouted across the battlefield, "Now strike while I am holding it back." The combined attack that followed was unlike anything ever seen in galactic history. Elven starfire enhanced by quantum entanglement technology punched through the hunger's defenses, while dragon breath weapons powered by human fusion cores burned the creature in dimensions it thought were safe. But the monster was not defeated easily. Its death throes threatened to tear apart local spacetime itself. Dimensional rifts opened randomly as the creature thrashed, trying to drag both fleets into the dark space between worlds where it could devour them. At leisure, Vorthak made the choice that sealed their victory. The ancient dragon wrapped his massive form around Jake's dissolving energy body, and together they became the stabilizing force that held reality together. As the creature died, the dragon's sacrifice anchored Jake's consciousness in the space between dimensions. As the hunger finally dissolved back into the cosmic void where it belonged, Jake's voice echoed across both fleets one last time. Tell Lyrelai that love is the strongest bridge of all. Tell her I will be watching over both our peoples from the spaces between stars. The dimensional rifts sealed themselves, and the immediate danger passed, but the cost of victory was clear. 2 heroes had given their lives to save everyone. Else the combined fleet hung in space, surrounded by the wreckage of the battle and the grief of survivors. Lyrelai stood in the crystal gardens, looking up at the night sky where a new star had appeared. It pulsed with gentle light that somehow reminded her of Jake's smile. She knew without being told that the star was him, or what he had become, watching over both their worlds. The war ended not with conquest or surrender, but with understanding. The Confederation and the Elven Realm signed a treaty that would protect the galaxy for generations to come. Both peoples had learned that their differences made them stronger when they worked together. Dr. Foster became the first human ambassador to the Elven Court, while several elf mages joined human research stations to study the combination of magic and technology that had saved them all. The bridge Jake had built between the worlds continued to grow stronger. Admiral Kane retired from military service and wrote the official history of the war. He made sure that both Jake's sacrifice and the lesson of cooperation were never forgotten. Future generations would know that working together was always better than fighting alone. Queen Eliana stepped down from the throne, passing the crown to her daughter, who had learned the true meaning of leadership through loss and love. Lyrelai became a wise ruler who always remembered that the greatest strength came from building bridges instead of walls. In the crystal gardens where Jake and Lyrelai had played as children, a new tree began to grow. Its branches reached toward both earth and stars, bearing flowers that bloomed in colors no single world had ever seen. The tree was fed by the energy that flowed from the new star above, connecting the physical world to the space between dimensions. Lyrelai visited the tree every year on the anniversary of the battle. Visitors often asked about its significance and about the bright star that seemed to watch over their world. The question always came from her mother, who, despite knowing the answer, liked to hear it told again. "Who is he?" Queen Eliana would ask, gesturing toward the memorial tree and the star above, and Lyrelai would smile through tears that were both sad and proud as she gave the answer that had become legend. "He is the human I married, the bridge that saved us all, the love that holds 2 worlds together." The tree would chime softly in response to her words, its crystal leaves catching the light from the star above. Children from both human and elf families would play in its shade, learning that differences could become strengths and that love was indeed the strongest bridge of all. Jake Morrison had become something beyond life and death, a guardian spirit who watched over the alliance he had died to create. His consciousness flowed through the connections between both peoples, ensuring that the peace would last and that the lessons of unity would never be forgotten. Sometimes on quiet nights, when the star pulsed, especially bright, Lyrelai could almost hear his voice carried on the wind, telling her that love transcends death and that some bridges once built last forever. The boy, who had learned to make crystal flowers sing, had become the eternal song that kept 2 worlds in harmony. The war was over, but the peace it had created would endure as long as there were people who remembered that working together was always better than fighting alone. And in the space between stars, Jake Morrison continued his watch, making sure that the bridge between worlds would never fall.